Hi out there, I'm Samantha Edwards. I'm about to have a chat with a bit of a troublemaker. Here he is. This is Carl Bromley. He's a much loved and respected pastor from Christchurch, that's New Zealand for our Australian viewers. Now, the New Zealand police have been campaigning hard to have this man labelled as a threat to society. I mean, after all, look at him, here he is trying to have church. Did he not get the memo? Sporting game venues, safe. Liquor stores, safe. Brothels, strip clubs, safe. If you need an abortion, no worries. Come on in. But church is highly dangerous. I'm not sure how that works. I think it's a little bit along the lines of if you're standing up in the food court, it'll get you. But if you're sitting down, you're safe. Anyway, I digress. It's come to the attention of the New Zealand police that Pastor Carl Bromley owned a rabbit shooting gun. Yes, he's licensed and registered and he's never even fired it, funnily enough. He's never made any threats of violence or even suggestions. But nevertheless, now we have a pastor who wants to have church and he owns a possum shooting gun and it's locked in a safe in his house and he even has ammunition. Clearly, something had to be done about this menace to society. Well, you know what our brave men and women in blue did? They got together and they loaded lots of their buddies into 5 marked police cars. They weren't about to get distracted by real crime or real criminals. No. You know, they head down the road because they knew he was going out that night. And when they were sure he was gone, they snuck up his driveway and they jimmied the window open and they bust on in there and they ripped that gun safe right out of the wall. And they didn't stop there. No, they ransacked his house, flipped over the bed and tipped the drawers out, rifled through all his wife's personal belongings. Funny thing is, though, you know, the police haven't even contacted him to talk about this threat of this, you know, ominous danger that he posed that would cause them to take such serious actions. I don't know. I don't want to cast aspersions on our noble police force, but it's almost as if they were trying to create the illusion of a threat with the 5 marked police cars. A little bit like they do with the masks. I will now cut over to Pastor Carl Bromley and we'll have a chat about what proved to be a very memorable New Year's Eve. So I'm with Pastor Carl. Tell us, what's the name of your church, Pastor Carl?
Well, thanks, Sam. It's called the Life Connection Missionary Baptist Fellowship, or TLC for short.
TLC, I love it.
Everyone needs a bit of TLC.
Oh, we sure do. It's been a pretty rough couple of years for most of us. Anyway, I just wanted to have a chat with you today to talk about what happened at your home the other night, New Year's Eve. You had some pretty unwelcome intruders who basically did a fair bit of damage and took some of your property. Is that
Absolutely. Right? It was a very violent home invasion from our perspective, forced entry through, ironically, through the very window we hold our Sunday worship in, and pushed past a massive hanging of the national anthem that we have there with the royal crest on it. You know, the crest that the police have on their arms with the crown and the woman and the Māori warrior. They pushed past that while breaking into our home through our area we have worship, which I thought was quite ironic in itself. They damaged the window and they damaged a lot, various parts of the property. So it was a very violent home invasion.
Well, that must have given you a bit of a fright to come home to. Did they leave a notice on your door or anything to let you know that your home had been raided?
When my wife and I got home, there was no calling card at all, except for the vandalism that occurred that we found. There was no police business card left on our door or a notice on our door saying, would you please contact us? We felt the need to force our way into your home while you weren't there. It wasn't until later on in the evening when I cleared my messages, and on that message they said that they basically entered the property under an event that questioned my suitability as a firearms owner. So it was just some question about my suitability, and so there was nothing there about imminent risk or question of my mental health state or anything like that. And the crazy thing about that is that, look, if they had just text messaged me or left a note, my wife and I would have made them a cup of tea and sat down and discussed any issues that they might have had. But really, it was absolutely incredible overreach, and their rationale for what they did in terms of identifying a question about my suitability was just crazy in the context of the damage done and the extreme measures they went to break into the house.
Yeah, it's absurd. What did they take?
So they took from the house from my gun safe as a licensed firearms owner. They removed my .22 rifle and my ammunition. And so I had a .22 rifle given to me. I mean, it's a pea shooter. I mean, it's good for possum shooting or rabbit shooting. I'm not a person that actually enjoys killing anything. I love life, whether it's people or animals. And I just recently bought a bunch of ammo because ammunition is literally going through the roof in terms of prices. It's very hard to get now. And never even fired this rifle at all. And for the only two guns I've actually owned, ironically, I've never fired any of them. So that's how much of a enthusiast I am.
Yeah, so Jesse James, it sounds like they were just justifying their actions by basically questioning your suitability.
Evidently someone, apparently, allegedly, I don't know because they haven't been in touch since their home invasion, but whether a paranoid person or a troll, a hater that you tend to attract when you have a YouTube channel, they responded in this fashion.
Well, there may or may not have even been a report. I think we've all learnt that our government's quite comfortable with presenting whatever narrative best achieves their purposes.
They certainly haven't disclosed it, and you'd think you'd have a right to at least have some information, considering the reckless and extreme violation that incurred upon myself and my wife, and that left my wife traumatised and our neighbour as well. So, yeah.
Considering they felt they needed to force entry, bring 5 cars, they must have considered you a pretty serious threat, and they must have followed you up some pretty serious questioning in regards to this report.
Not at all, Sam. They mention that as the justification. And look, I've worked in mental health for 30 years, specialised in mental health, psychiatry, and psychology as a nurse, from psychiatric inpatients right through to a crisis team. I worked with a crisis team for a while, as well as doing crisis work for many years in child, adolescent, and family mental health services. So I was working with risk analysis all the time. And I know when within the Mental Health Act, for example, when you need to overreach someone's freedom, it's done because you're either a danger to yourself or someone else. So in this context, if they were going to use such extreme measures, it would only be if justifiably if I was a danger to myself or someone else. And if that was the case, they're being responsible to follow me up very quickly with an assessment or a visit to assess my mental health state, and none of that has happened. I've not even heard a whisper from them since New Year's Eve.
Wow. So from the context of your professional experience, and even just as a layperson like myself, the complete absence of follow-up pretty much suggests that the reasons for this raid were actually completely bogus. The threat that you pose is because of things like your YouTube channel and because you are outspoken with the truth. I don't think you've held up any liquor stores lately, and I don't think you have any murderous intentions towards anyone. Never. Just a pretty sad state of affairs, isn't it? Not even a knock on the door. Heck, show up with your search warrant. Do things properly and respectfully. Since when have the police in New Zealand waited for an innocent citizen to go out so that they can bust into their house and take a hunting rifle, especially when that citizen is of sound mind and has never made any threats of violence?
That's what it seemed like. It seemed like they waited for us to be out. We went to our friends, we grabbed a bottle of grape juice, and we went down the road. And on the way down the road, I saw 5 marked police cars, a couple of streets over my house. And I said, "Hey, look, honey, they're coming for me," just joking. That's exactly what they're doing. And I think they knew when it was going out. I mean, the 22 rifle wasn't a risk itself. It wasn't going to jump out and do anything. A person is a risk, not the object. And so it's totally incongruent. The measures taken were totally out of whack with the risk obviously at hand. Absolutely just egregious, crazy, really quite insane or nefarious.
I think the latter. Like I said before, there is no longer any tolerance in this nation for anyone who speaks against the government. Do you have a license for this gun, Pastor Carl?
In New Zealand, we need to be licensed as gun owners, so you go through a rigorous course of being deemed a fit and proper person to own a firearm, which I did about 3 years ago, I think it was. They come and they do interviews with your wife or husband if you have one, and a character reference, and then they make sure you have appropriate facilities to keep a firearm safe, like I had a safe, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not just some kind of willy-nilly thing they do. And so I was completely licensed, completely in my legal right to have a 22. And a 22 rifle amongst firearms owners will generally be seen as a bunny shooter or a possum shooter at the most. And I had a media report interviewing me today and saying, "Oh, you've got to admit that, a gun can kill people. Well, so can knives, and so can cars, and so can hammers." And I referenced the reality and fact that, we saw 2 examples of disgusting, horrible, vile acts of violence done a couple of countdowns this last year with knives. Sadly, unfortunately, people take lives of many other weapons or objects. You don't need a gun to do that. And to sort of paint me in some kind of light that I'm some kind of risk because I've got 22 ammo, it's just pathetic, in my view.
It's the logic is completely bonkers. Well, there is no logic. I mean, are they going to do this to everyone who owns a hunting rifle or anyone who hunts possums and rabbits in New Zealand? This is probably just the beginning of what we have to look forward to if we don't comply with this government's agenda. Anyway, how's your wife doing, Carl? What a horrible experience for her.
Oh, absolutely. Really traumatised her a lot. I mean, having your wee nest broken into and vandalised in the way it was, then to find out that the people who are supposed to be there to protect you were the people that violated you is incredibly traumatising. So she was literally shaking visibly 2 hours after the event, and she did call victim support, had a good talk to them, and they finally called back today. But she's so traumatised that she doesn't feel comfortable even going to our main bedroom anymore. She doesn't want to sleep in there. They've gone through all her personal drawers, flipped over the mattress, who knows what. Very, very disturbing to see men and perhaps policewomen treat and violate women this way through this very unprofessional and, it's hard to find words to describe this kind of inane kind of behaviour, to do that to someone.
Well, I think violating is a very appropriate word, and so is intimidating. It's what it's all about. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, there's been a lot of mention in mainstream media about new tactical response teams that, just trying to create fear.
So step out of line, or we might violently invade your home and raid it and search it as well.
That's right.
Sad, very, very sad, Sam.
It is. It's very sad. This is the country that our children have to grow up in. Anyway, Pastor Carl, what's your comment on the state of democracy in this nation when the police can literally break into your house and tip it upside down if you speak against the government?
This is a reflection of what is happening in our nation, has been happening in our nation over the last few years, this insidious seeping in of a globalistic kind of politics where our government and the police who serve this government are no longer serving the people of New Zealand. The government has their back to the people of New Zealand and are taking orders and acquiescing, have jointly committed themselves to the agenda of the globalists. This is no conspiracy. Anyone can go on their computer and go to the United Nations website or websites such as the World Economic Forum and see these political contracts that we've literally signed into see the policies within New Zealand government, the legislation be passed, reflecting and complying to these directives and agendas from the United Nations and World Economic Forum. So what we have now in New Zealand, objectively, down the line, is a totalitarian state. And anyone can look up totalitarianism, and you'll be shocked and gobsmacked to see that our politics and our policing ticks every box in terms of the characteristics of a totalitarian state, and become a bit of a police state where anyone who criticises the government becomes a target is part of the symptoms of a totalitarian state.
So do you think it's because of the sharing of these truths that you've been targeted?
I definitely think it's part of. I definitely think it's part of it. I think I am a target. I think I am being watched, and I've worked in mental health, so I know what paranoia is, and my basis for that is rational, logical, and evidence based. It's definitely within its validity of what I've experienced from the New Zealand Police and online. So online, for people who don't have a YouTube channel or have not been outspoken on social media, there's a whole community of people who are very pro-government, very left-winged, who actually make it their occupation to hunt people down like me, go through all your videos, pull up any bit of garbage or rubbish, twist it out of context, and go after you. Now, one good example of that recently was Lee Williams, who has a YouTube channel called Cross the Rubicon, and he was utterly targeted and to the point of being smashed in terms of his reputation. He lost his job, and as a result, consequently, he had left the country as a result of that. And that went as high up as a particular party in government and people in a community of far leftists who literally make it their business to troll, put out surveys, and just raise public attention to people. And these people are lying to the government. So they are sympathisers with the government, and they basically do the government's bidding for them. And they're powerful, they're ugly, they're vile. I mean, there's a video on YouTube at the moment, still on YouTube, by one vile individual calling for Carl Bromley to be scrubbed to cleanse Christchurch. And that's basically a death threat. And it's on YouTube. And these kind of people don't care. They're just people who have no respect for life. They take pleasure in people's misery and suffering. And they get away with it. But anyone who's a bit conservative, Christians, anything like that, as soon as you speak up, stand up against the government or call the police out for behaving badly, you become a target, and you no longer find yourself in a position of receiving protection or justice. You just get ignored.
Absolutely, because you're a hindrance to their agenda and you're shedding light on their schemes. So it's just incredible. I mean, we teach our children not to bully and not to call names or mock people, to respect their choices and their individuality, and never to force their will on others, especially when it comes to their bodies. But all of a sudden, our government has led us into a completely new environment where abuse and bullying and as you said, even threats on a person's life are acceptable, almost commendable, if that person has spoken against the government. It's almost as if they've brought it on themselves. It's just incredible. I mean, this government has actively promoted the vilifying of anyone who calls them out, or more to the point, questions the COVID narrative, because that's the bigger picture for their global reset / takeover. It's astounding to watch.
Isn't it just? I mean, we're witnessing the terrorising of a nation right now, in my view, on many fronts. You know, the fear of if you don't comply, you will lose your job, you will lose your house, you will lose your ability to travel, go to restaurants, cafes, not based on a medical decision, but based on whether or not you will comply to a government directive. This is interesting times. And I worked at Child, Youth and Family Mental Health Service. We did a lot of symposiums on bullying and stuff like that in schools. And yet, here we are. We're facing the terror of the greatest bullies this country's ever seen, our own government. And now the police are enlisting and supporting this narrative because it's the government they serve, not the people anymore.
Well, there you have it, folks. Well, the gang house down the road from you, which is filled with people who make crime their occupation, might also be filled with an arsenal of weapons. We can all sleep peacefully tonight, knowing that the dastardly Pastor Carl Bromley, who preaches the Bible as his occupation, has been separated from his possum shooting rifle. Good grief. Is what happened to Pastor Carl reasonable in your opinion? Do you know anyone who owns a hunting rifle of any kind? Perhaps you own one yourself. How do you feel about the fact that now all it takes is a whisper of dissension towards the government and your home could be invaded, vandalized, and your property seized? I'm going to be straight with you. The government and the police have always known that Pastor Carl is not a threat to society, but what they do know is that he is a threat to the lies that are being spewed upon this nation, because he is a truth speaker and he actually exposes the truth. He doesn't just march down the road shouting freedom and rights. He exposes the truth, and so that makes him a threat to them. He's a threat to anything that's happening in the darkness because he keeps shining his big shiny torch in there. Anyway, please look out for part 2 of this video where I go into the real reason that Pastor Carl Bromley's home was invaded on New Year's Eve. Until then, thank you very much for joining me. Bye.